From MTN Sports, welcome to Grizzly Insider, sponsored by Albertsons Safeway.
Hello everyone and welcome to this week's edition of the Grizzly Insider here on the Montana Television Network. Alongside the voice of the Grizz, Riley Corcoran, I'm Kyle Hansen, and we're heading into the bye week for the Montana Grizzlies and coming off of a win over Northern Arizona. Montana 5-2 and, kind of another little weird, wild game here in Washington Grizzly Stadium.
I tell you what, Kyle, I don't think there's a normal game that we've had all season long, even down to the 59-2 game that was scoregami, that was the first time ever. So it's been a wild year, and I think everyone was ready for the bye week. You go 7 consecutive weeks, and it was a grind in more ways than one, and we had another unique game from the shootouts of the last couple of weeks to now, it was the defensive battle. Yet the Grizz, the consistent theme, they had to come from behind. And I use this maybe in twofold setting here, Kyle. They're comfortable coming from behind, but also they're digging themselves this first half hole. So a little bit of a double-edged sword, but the Grizz were able to overcome it.
100%. And, like we kind of previewed this, NAU, game opponent. The record doesn't quite indicate where they're at. Brian Wright doing a tremendous job so far, brought in a lot of new faces, a lot of new guys on the coaching staff, and they are game. Their defense was as good as it gets, and the Grizzlies, especially in that first half, struggled with that. Alex McLaughlin, we talked about him, but what a player he is as a sophomore at safety. And, just from there, the Grizz defense held up well with a couple of stops, but the offense was struggling to get going.
Yeah, Alex McLaughlin leads the way. I mean, that's secondary, the real deal. And when you see what the Grizz had to do, and you give a lot of credit because, again, they made the adjustments, but that first half, they were stymied. 3 consecutive 3-and-outs. That only happened one at a time this year. Of course, that was in Grand Forks against UND. So to really shut them down was impressive from NAU. I think that's a team that we're going to look down the road, Kyle. Playoff potential. I know we're going to talk about it later in the show, but NAU, a ranked opponent coming in here, and they certainly were game for it. The Grizz, in the second half, though, I thought that they were okay being methodical. It was the explosive plays that we had seen in the previous games, those shootouts. They only had one play this week of over 20 yards on offense, that catch to Sawyer Racanelli. Besides that, they were okay being deliberate, and I think that was that patience, the adjustment they needed.
And for me, one of the low-key parts of this in that first half especially were those 2 stops. Hold them to a pair of field goals, very much bend, don't break. Kind of something that the defense last year did very well last year, at least in the beginning, before becoming a pretty dominant force. Now let's pivot to the second half, of course. Offense starts to come alive a little bit more, and then defensively, outside of that 88-yard touchdown, Grizzlies held them to 43 yards passing. Outside of that, obviously P.J. London, I believe their 3rd or 4th string quarterback. They dealt with some injuries there, but the defense, I felt, really settled in. The offense was able to catch up from there.
I think so, and it's important to praise the defense after the last couple of weeks, right? They were under the microscope. They answered the bell no matter who was at quarterback. It was a unique game plan. Now, Brian Wright, he's an offensive mind, so they were having wide receivers take direct snaps, and they were bouncing it around, and that 88-yard touchdown, a good example of that. But the Grizzly defense really held strong, and I do like that bend but don't break mantra, Kyle, because they're saying, all right, with how explosive our offense is, why would we put ourselves in position to allow big plays? Those are the backbreakers that we saw the previous weeks come up to eventually bite Montana. The adjustment that they made was so key, and I think especially at this point in the season, to be able to make that going into your bye week and then going into 2 games that are winnable, it was a good point because we saw Northern Arizona be the turning point a year ago. It might be the turning point in this season as well.
How poetic is that, right? Yeah. Well, and then another good stat, too, is obviously NAU only 3 for 13 on 3rd downs. That was another stat that the Grizzlies have kind of been struggling at a little bit. And then obviously the game ends on a forced turnover. Something else the Grizzlies haven't quite generated as much of, but kind of sealed the deal with Ronald Jackson and Jackson Lee.
Well, it's crazy that those turnovers and those pivot points, right, the 3rd down conversions, because Northern Arizona was the top 3rd down defense as well in the Big Sky. Grizz did pretty well on the offensive side of things. Turnovers, you thought a little bit in the first half, not to go back, but you thought it was maybe a hangover effect from Weber State. The fact NAU scores on defense first, but then the Grizz finally get that takeaway they needed. You could just see it. Complementary football. All 3 phases worked for Montana, and really to see the defense have that kind of performance, that'll go waves moving forward.
Absolutely. Big win for the Grizzlies heading into the bye week. Don't go anywhere. After the break, head coach Bobby Hauck will join the show right here on the Grizzly Insider.
Welcome back to Grizzly Insider, sponsored by Albertsons Safeway.
Welcome back into the Grizzly Insider, and to take a page from my co-host Riley Corcoran, a very happy head coach Bobby Hauck here after a Grizzly win 31-20 over Northern Arizona and a homecoming win to boot. Coach, you are 12-1 on homecoming games here as the Grizzly head coach. First question, how's it feel to get the win? Second, how was your homecoming?
Homecoming's great. So I went reverse order on you there, and it's always good to win, man. Everybody's good in college football. There's a new era of college football. Everybody's good, and that team we beat yesterday played really hard and tough against us, and it was good to get that win.
For you, homecoming I know is a little special, right? Seeing some of the guys come back, you get a chance to kind of enjoy some of the festivities too. Just speak to what homecoming means to you, the university, and what the team gets to provide for the community.
Well, for the Haucks, you know, it's there's family in town, there's all kinds of college friends, and then there's all kinds of former players. So we have a good time with it, and it was just awesome to hang out after the game with all those groups of people.
100%. Well, switching gears over to the football game itself, another top 25 matchup for you guys, and NAU came in ready to play kind of as you predicted. So let's go ahead and start with that first half, right? They kind of jump out with that turnover to get the touchdown, but you guys had a couple of defensive stops too, right? To kind of, the defense seemed to settle in. Offense just felt like they needed a little time to get going. Just from your perspective, what stood out to you most in that first half against the Lumberjacks?
We came out and moved the ball, and then we gave up a touchdown on offense. And then we roughed the punter after stopping him and gave up 3 there too. So the question mark the last couple of weeks is our defense has given up some points, and we didn't help them a bunch yesterday. I mean, we gave up points with the other 2 phases, but the defense played great throughout. Our offense was not in a rhythm. We couldn't quite sustain drives. We couldn't get it in the end zone. We had good stuff, but we weren't getting points on the board. So the first half was a battle for us. Some of it self-inflicted, some of it NAU playing really well and giving us some new things. You know, it was a dang battle. We were down 10 at half with 3 on the board. It wasn't a great first half for us.
No doubt. Well, how much do you think those defensive stops maybe set the tone a little bit, right? Because, you know, they got in deep, but your guys held them out of the goal line and held them to field goals on those 2 drives.
Yeah, that's big. You know, especially when they get down to that end of the field to make them kick a field goal and then, you know, maybe have a chance to block it or something like that. I thought our defense was terrific. When we talk about the second half, they only gave up 1 play on the entire day for the most part. So the defense was terrific. It was great to see. It excites me about the next games coming up here.
It's a great segue because outside of that 88-yard touchdown, which is a pass, technically their quarterback only 43 yards passing that your defense allowed the rest of that entire game. So switching gears to that second half, everybody settled in, 4 touchdowns in the second half. What switched gears there for you guys as you were able to take and maintain the lead towards win? We
got some of our protections targeted a little better, and so the quarterback had more time. They did a lot of post-snap and just pre-snap movement and switching fronts. I thought we were better targeted in the second half, and we were able to sustain things, both run and pass game. We had some chances for some big runs. They didn't ever materialize, but you know, they were a little bit all or nothing with some of that stuff, and you know, NAU did a good job, but in the end, the Grizz were too much for him.
In the postgame, you really highlighted quarterback Logan Fife, right, and the way he was playing yesterday, some of the non-statistical things, as you mentioned, and just what he was doing in the flow. Can you just speak to his impact and what he did for you guys against NAU?
Well, he keeps evolving as a player, and Logan's done a really nice job the last few weeks. He's started the last 3 games for us and played really well. Some of the things where he's checking protections and getting us into run game and just the way he's seeing things is really improving. And it's typical of all football players at all positions, but it's great when the quarterbacks can do that and they start to understand more and more.
One more guy I'm going to ask you about because he's going to join us on the show here in a little bit is Sawyer Racanelli, kind of the do-all guy, right? Special teams, offense, all that stuff. How have you seen him grow now that he's also healthy, you know, from a couple of years ago and now producing for you guys?
Yeah, he's battled through some injury stuff, and it's great to see him full speed, and he has been, and he keeps growing as a football player. Does everything really well. He works hard in the run game, he works hard in the special teams, and he's got a big body. He can go up and get the ball in traffic, and just really pleased with how he's progressing.
No doubt. Well, last question for me, Coach. Obviously 5-2, 2-1 in Big Sky play heading into the bye. What do you think of the team right now? What do you think of the season so far, and how do you guys use this upcoming week?
Well, I think we found a lot about our team the last couple of weeks. Even though we fought back and took the lead last week and then didn't find a way to win it, which was, it was too bad. But I think we've got a very focused and determined team. I don't think they get rattled in any situation, and I think that'll pay dividends for us moving forward. So we've got this week off, and then big game next week.
Absolutely. Well, as always, Coach, thanks for joining us. Congrats on the win, and we'll see you after the bye.
All right, here we go. Go Grizz, Kyle.
Absolutely. Coming up, Sawyer Racanelli will join us here on the Grizzly Insider.
Welcome back to Grizzly Insider, sponsored by Albertson Safeway.
Welcome back into the Grizzly Insider. We're excited to be joined by wide receiver Sawyer Racanelli, who's coming off a career-high game against Northern Arizona with 4 catches for 65 yards. Sawyer, first of all, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here. What a year you're having, and let's go ahead and talk about the game first, right? Another wild game, and it seems to be something you guys are kind of used to at this point. From the player's perspective, just speak about winning that game and what it took to get that one done.
Yeah, I mean, it's always good to get an in-conference win, especially against a pretty good opponent like NAU. Coming off a loss last week. We've got a lot of work to do, and I think that we had a good week of practice, and the coaches put us in a position to succeed this week, and we somehow are keeping them close the last couple of weeks, but we're pulling them out in any ways we can. Offense, defense, special teams, whatever we can do to get the win.
Offensively, and Coach Hauck just mentioned it here on the show that you guys, he liked what you were seeing on offense. It was just wasn't quite getting that final push to get some scores, right? You obviously had a huge catch that set up a field goal. So offensively in the first half, what was working and what did you guys maybe need to adjust heading into the second half?
Yeah, no, our whole plan was those RPOs early. Get the ball out quick, get the ball to our playmakers, and then we were first and second down, we couldn't really do much, but our third down we were doing pretty well. So it was just basically getting the ball out and getting the ball to our playmakers and kind of seeing what we could do. And they kind of stonewalled us a little bit, but I think in that second half we rallied off 28 or something, whatever it was. So obviously we made the adjustments and they worked out.
The way you went, absolutely. Yeah. And like you mentioned, 4 touchdowns in that second half there. So what switched a little bit? How were you guys able to kind of cap these drives? And obviously Logan had a big game, but really everybody seemed to kind of be flowing as you guys put this one away. Yeah,
I think it's just honestly just figuring things out as you go. Our coaches are good at making adjustments in the second half. We've primarily been a second half team, which would be nice to put 2 halves together, but it's just guys making plays. They were playing one-on-one coverage on the outside and putting guys in the box. So it's just guys working hard and making plays. It's once you get in that groove, it's kind of hard to stop, and that's kind of how our offense has been the whole year.
For your perspective, so obviously you came here a couple years ago from the University of Washington and had the injury kind of right out of the gates, and then you're kind of working back last year, and this year you're kind of having a breakout year both on offense and special teams. So for you, I guess speak kind of at large about your Grizzly career right now and just kind of working back last year and then seeing that pay off this year.
It hasn't been the exact way I thought college football was going to go when I first got into it, but obviously I was at Washington for 2 years. I came here in 2022, blew my knee out, and then sat that year. And then last year it was kind of just do whatever I can to get on the field. Offense, special teams, whatever works. And then ultimately this year, now being in a starting role, it's a little bit different, and just trying to make plays, blocking, catching, running, all that stuff. And then special teams is fun. It's a different deal, but I haven't tackled anybody for a long time, and now being able to tackle people, it's pretty fun.
How much of last year was really just knocking the rust off and just really getting kind of your legs back under you, right? Because, very serious knee injury, you know, you kind of want to work yourself back both physically and mentally, right? It's a lot bigger picture than people realize.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of more mental than it's physical. Like, you feel good about 10 months, and then that mental part of it, though, it just hangs with you, and it lingers in your mind. And obviously having 2 of them made things a little bit worse. So I was constantly thinking about it, but once you get to about that 16-month mark, when I came back, it was kind of like I was ready to go. But the body wasn't quite ready yet, and I just had to build that endurance up and get comfortable doing things that I wasn't quite used to yet.
And you mentioned, I mean, you haven't tackled someone in a long time, but no one would know that because you've had a couple of blow-ups on special teams, and then obviously in the passing game, things are going well there too. So speak to, I guess, doing special teams first, and what's it like kind of getting some of those big tackles and kind of maybe setting the tone on maybe a punt or something like that?
Yeah, I know. Coach Hauck, he takes pride in special teams, and I think our whole team does. It's a unit that is made up of physical players, fast guys, strong guys, and you got to be smart to play it. And having a great mind like Coach Hauck call the plays and set us up in the best situations is fun. And there's something about hitting the guy that makes it a little bit more fun than catching a ball. So it's fun being out there and making plays, tackling guys, and just setting the tone for. When you make a big play on punt, then it gets the defense riled up. So just trying to make sure that I'm making plays and when my number's called.
Obviously, offensively, you guys have been rolling the last few weeks, and one of the best offenses in the entire FCS. What's it like being a part of this and watching Logan do his thing, but being surrounded by so many playmakers, a great O-line? Just what's it like, just being one of these guys who's been a big part of that?
Oh yeah, I'm just one of the guys. We got so many athletes on our team. I mean, Keelan went up for 100 and something last week, and then Junior the week before, and Eli and Osmo are running all over the field, and Logan's making plays, getting the balls to the right guy. And our O-line is just dominating in every aspect. So just to be one of the guys out there is fun, and just like I said, make plays when my number's called. And we're a pretty unselfish group, so if a win's a win, and no one really cares what the stats are.
A lot of fun indeed. You're doing a great job at it. Yeah. Sawyer, thanks so much for joining us here, and good luck the rest of the way.
Thank you.
Absolutely. We'll be right back here on the Grizzly Insider.
Take coverage of the Grizz with you. Download our app for your favorite mobile device today. Welcome back to Grizzly Insider, sponsored by Albertson Safeway.
And welcome back to the Grizzly Insider. Time for everyone to catch their breath here at the bye week. Kyle Hansen joins me now. And Kyle, I tell you, when you look at where Montana is at in the Big Sky Conference race, we'll get to the numbers in a moment. But just last week's games, what stood out to you? Because it just seems every single week there's a marquee matchup we look forward to, and there's probably a surprise out there as well.
100%. And you'd be hard-pressed not to look at the one that was between the contenders, right? The top 10 matchup over in Bozeman between Montana State and Idaho. Bobcats rolling in that contest. What a huge win for them as they remain undefeated. But then you look at Eastern Washington taking down Sacramento State. That's another big game right there. And those Eagles, they're pesky right now, and they're dangerous because you look at some of the teams that they have coming up, whether that be Montana State, whether that be UC Davis. They could be a dangerous team. Idaho on the road, things like that. So those games kind of stood out. And obviously, the best part about this time of the year, we know these teams so well, and going forward, there's a lot of big matchups.
There's a lot of big-time matchups. One that caught my attention, how about Northern Colorado? Nation's longest losing streak. Weber State has that hangover effect, the big win over Montana, and then they fall. Northern Colorado gets their first win in the Ed Lamb era. They go into their bye week, which should set up an interesting matchup with Montana the following week. So we take a look at Montana's remaining schedule. What kind of stands out to you? I know that everyone's looking at the two big matchups that are dangling there for the Grizz, but also they have to take care of business the other three.
1,000%. And you look at upcoming first is their two longest road trips of the season, right? So it's Greeley and then Cal Poly down in San Luis Obispo. So you're out of the gates with those two teams in the bottom part of the standings for the Big Sky Conference. If you take care of business there, that sets you up with a potential top 10 matchup with UC Davis, who right now is one of the two undefeated teams in conference play with Montana State, and Davis right now a contender. So that's a big game here in Missoula at the early part of November. Then you go to the home game against Portland State on senior night, and then of course the road game at the Bobcats. So it's kind of the ebbs and flows of it, right? You got some teams at the bottom, some teams on the top. So if you're Montana, you look at some prime opportunities to jump that can prepare you confidence-wise for these potential top 10 matchups.
And we made sure to get Coach Hauck out of the studio before we started to look ahead. He's the 1 week at a time approach, but that really is the big picture view. And when you look at the conference standings, you mentioned the contenders, UC Davis, the Cats, the only undefeated teams, just 3 teams with 1 loss, Montana being one of them. Kyle, it's interesting, in the last 18 years, there has not been a 2-loss champion in the Big Sky. It creates that sense of urgency that you feel from everyone down the list in the standings.
100%, right? And you look at the teams who are undefeated, right? Because then it's like, well, maybe there's more breathing room for them, but also some pressure, because you talked about this while we're off camera. The Grizz, Davis, and the Cats are all going to see each other kind of down this latter half of the stretch. And then you look at an Idaho, who's a 2-loss team, but pretty favorable schedule down the road for the Vandals to potentially end up at 6-2 should someone else fall to 6-2 and win the conference title. So you never know how things are going to shake out, but right now things are looking good. And if you're the Grizzlies, you got to like what you have ahead of you as you prepare for these big matchups.
Well, and as the Grizz get ready to sit back this weekend, a couple games to watch out for. UC Davis travels to pesky Eastern Washington. Then that level of desperation, Weber State playing Sacramento State. That could be an elimination game already. It's been a great show so far. We'll wrap it up when we come back.
There's more coverage of the Grizzlies online anytime at montanasports.com. Welcome back to Grizzly Insider, sponsored by Albertson Safeway.
Well, as we wrap things up here on the Grizzly Insider, we're going to take a closer look at the Grizz soccer and volleyball teams as their seasons are starting to wind to a close. Obviously, soccer tied for first place in the league, and volleyball, a lot of work to do, but a prime opportunity as they try to work their way up the standings.
Absolutely. Let's start with soccer. It's amazing how fast the season goes, Kyle, because they start early, they get us started in August, and all of a sudden, boom, they're ready on the back half of conference play. Just 4 matches left in the regular season. And what Chris Chidovitsky, his team, did last weekend, incredible. Beating Idaho, now in first place in the conference. 3 of their final 4 coming on the road. So be a big-time challenge. And this week, the toughest logistical trip at Sacramento State Friday. Big home match Sunday against Portland State. Then you go to Grizzly Volleyball, and they've had a tough start, at least to their conference action. When you look at maybe their opponents right now, they were up against it. Now 5 of their next 7 will be at home after this tough road trip at Northern Arizona this week. Those 2 teams tied for 8th right now in the standings. 8 teams make the conference tournament. Remember, Grizzly volleyball in their best 3-year stretch in 15 years. So trying to maintain that pace, and they'll have a big weekend here.
And special weekend coming up in November 6th to the 10th. The Grizz is going to host the Big Sky Soccer Championships mixed in there with the Grizz home football game against UC Davis. What a great week that's going to be.
It's going to be busy for all of us. Don't forget, home basketball happening as well on Sunday. So we've got a little bit of everything on the horizon. Everybody enjoy and rest up here on the bye week.
Crossover season is almost officially here, no doubt about it. Well, thank you so much for joining us here on the Grizzly Insider. Next week, we will have head soccer coach Chris Chidovitsky and head volleyball coach Allison Lawrence join us to give us updates on the season. We'll see you then. Have a great weekend.